What's up everyone, welcome to Ashley Talks Movies and welcome to my review of Wicked for Good. This is part 2 of director Jon M's adaptation of the hit Broadway musical. The second half finds Elphaba, once again played by Cynthia Erivo, living in exile after being branded the Wicked Witch of the West. Meanwhile, her old friend and schoolmate Glinda, played by Ariana Grande, is living in Emerald City enjoying popularity as a symbol of good for all of Oz. Both will be tested as Elphaba continues her fight to expose the truth about the wizard and change Oz for good. Before I jump into the review, if you'd like to support the channel, there are a couple of ways you can do that. Make sure you subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Also, join the discussion, jump into the comments, and share your thoughts about the movie.
This is between us, the wizard, and I.
The Wicked Witch can't elude us forever. Not with Prince Fiero and his squadron hot on her trail.
Now, anyone who's seen the stage musical knows that the first half is different than the second half. The first half is lighter and filled with catchier songs, while the second half is darker in tone and more emotional. And the movie definitely follows that template. Wicked for Good isn't as good as Wicked Part 1, but it does a really good job of bringing this story to a conclusion. This time around, the story is more character and theme driven, and the movie really leans into the relationship between Elphaba and Glinda, and the anti-authoritarian themes, which I thought were handled really well. Now, I didn't have a ton of issues with this movie, but one of the biggest problems I had was with the pacing. There were times where it felt like the story was being stretched to fill a runtime. And then there were also scenes where there were some really awkward moments where it felt like the scenes went on for too long. I also thought the moments where the movie was trying to tie into the larger Wizard of Oz story were a little clumsy. And that might just have to do with how director Jon M decided to incorporate those elements into the movie, which I'm not going to get into detail about just because I don't do spoilers here. Now on to what did work for me in this movie. And just like the first movie, the performances here are a highlight. Both Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande deliver. Erivo is an absolute powerhouse. And, in the first movie, Elphaba was a character that was slowly coming out of her shell and trying to find herself. But here she's wiser and more confident, and Erivo brings that confidence to her performance. She really is a force, and she also brings that emotional depth needed to make you really feel for Elphaba's struggle. Grande is also amazing, and I think this movie gives her more to do. In the first movie, Glinda was more of a comedic role, which Ariana Grande completely nailed because she has natural comedic timing. But in part 2, Glinda undergoes quite the transformation, and Grande is able to handle the more dramatic aspects of the role this time around. And of course, they are great together. They don't have nearly as many scenes together as they did in part 1, which is a shame, but they make the most of the scenes that they do have together. I also thought the musical numbers here were really good, despite the songs in this movie not being as catchy as the ones in part 1. But this movie has some really great renditions of numbers like No Good Deed and For Good. I also like the new songs that were added just for the movie, although I will say The Girl in the Bubble, the song performed by Ariana Grande, is the better of the two. There's also a bit of a contrast here with the musical numbers when you compare them with the first movie, which is that they're not as elaborate. Now, in the first movie, there were musical numbers with a ton of choreography and spectacle, and you don't really get much of that here. Like, you do have some musical numbers with some choreography, dance numbers and things like that, but many of the musical numbers here are kind of scaled down and a little bit more intimate. So you'll just have Cynthia Erivo singing in a scene or Ariana Grande singing in a scene, which I thought fit really well with the more emotional tone of this movie. Another element where this movie really shines is with the costuming, and the costumes here are great, and they're very detailed and very colorful. And that was one of the things that I really admired about the first movie, and you get more of that here. The production design is also spectacular, and many of the sets looked and felt real. Now, this movie does use quite a bit of CGI, and some of it isn't good. That forest scene with Elphaba and the animals is especially egregious, but at least the sets don't seem like they were solely made up of green screens. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about the Wicked movies, and I remember when it was first announced that the story was going to be split into 2 movies, and there were people who were very concerned about that. Some people, thought it was merely a cash grab, and some people who were worried that the story would feel disjointed or that having 2 movies wouldn't feel justified. But having seen both movies, I can say that I do feel it's justified that they split this story into 2 parts, because I had a really hard time after watching Wicked for Good trying to wrap my head around having one movie with all of those elements in it. And to me, it would have been a movie that would have felt too overstuffed. With that being said, I do think that Wicked for Good is the weaker of the 2 movies. I think Wicked Part 1 is able to stand on its own, has a beginning, middle, and an end, whereas Wicked Part 2 really depends on Part 1. I still think it's a really solid movie, and it's fun, it's enjoyable, it has some really great performances, some wonderful music, and some really great costuming and cinematography. And I think if you're a fan of the musical and you really like the first movie, that you're really going to enjoy this one because it has pretty much a lot of the same elements that you would come to expect, and it does a really good job of bringing the story to a conclusion. So those are my thoughts on Wicked for Good, which is out in theaters this week. Do you plan on seeing it, or have you already seen it? If you have, let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. See you next time, everyone, and thanks for watching.